Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, October 3rd, 2019. We're back on live for another show. Feels like weekend. I don't know. Weird week for me, of course, back and forth between live shows and taped shows. But I think we've kept up with things about as well as possible. There's no way to actually have a sampling of everything from the fire hose of news. Although, honestly, maybe our best shot at it is, well, first of all, best thing out of the box that we could do is bring Greg Dworkin in here to try and help us organize our thoughts and get a handle on what's been going on. But I'm sure you've been noticing that over at Daily Coast, they've seem to have adopted a new approach to things. I mean, in addition to updating the news all day long with new posts, I'm seeing explicit news roundup posts that aren't those old open threads. We don't have those back. And we, of course, still have the abbreviated pundit roundup, but we're having to round up news once or even twice a day just to keep people up to date, up to speed on what's happening in news. But I guess if you can just make up anything you want and call it a quote and say that's news, or the president can just come out and scream anything he wants on television, regardless of the rules of what you used to be able to say on television, or for that matter, if the president can say anything that he wants to in violation of Facebook and Twitter terms of service that would get anybody else banned, but the president of the United States, who could really worry very much that he might be able to foment violence, right? That's not something we need to worry about. He'll be allowed to do that. It's crazy out there. And what a day. And Jacob Wall is back. I believe he's having another press conference today, another driveway special in the townhome driveway of his partner in crime, whatever the hell that other guy's name is. I don't even remember anymore. I think we might have skipped the story about Jacob Wall in between press conference related scandals. And I may have neglected to tell you in the various news rushes that there was something that I guess he got a hold of or started up his Instagram account, and he was taking pictures of himself supposedly traveling the world and smoking cigars and sitting in fantastic locales around the world. And as I recall, he tweeted out photos of himself claiming to be hanging out in Ukraine, which is kind of an interesting thing. This was before this was like a month or two before the Ukraine explosion, but he thought Ukraine might be a cool hot spot for him to tell people he was in. And then also another photo of himself smoking a cigar in what he claimed was Tel Aviv, Israel, but failing to notice that he had, of course, taken both of these pictures in what appears to be his backyard in front of the same fence. And they were very unlikely to have both had the exact same fencing in Ukraine, where he said he was the first time, and in Israel the second time. Busted for that, but I mean, more importantly, been busted about 3 or 4 times now with his formulaic press conference in his partner's driveway, announcing that he had exclusively dug up the sexual dirt on whoever the target of the day was. You'll recall that he was busted trying to bring forward someone with sexual misconduct charges against Robert Mueller. Later, when Pete Buttigieg started rocketing up in the polls, he decided that he had discovered somebody who was going to make allegations of sexual misconduct against Buttigieg. Both of them blew up. I think there was a third one in there somewhere. If not, we're on to the third now. Today he plans to have his super secret information revealed about all of the sexual misconduct he's dug up about the next most popular Democratic politician he could find, Elizabeth Warren. So, we'll see how that one goes. As I understand it, the allegations are that she has been carrying on a torrid love affair of some sort for the past few months with a bodybuilder ex-Marine, which sounds exactly like what Elizabeth Warren would be spending her time doing. She's got a lot of time to spare lately. So, of course, a lot of people have said, well, A, obviously it's Jacob Wohl, it's a lie, but B, why not embrace it? Someone was saying I think you should drop these, the press release that Wohl put together as leaflets at her rallies and campaign appearances. They had to drop them from helicopters, honestly. Sure, Elizabeth Warren on the road fighting for economic equality and better health care access and all the various things that any Democratic candidate at this point in time would be claiming to be fighting for, and carrying on a torrid love affair with a bodybuilder ex-Marine. 24 years old, as I understand it in the allegations. Fantastic. Nothing could be better. Is there better advertising for her vitality and vigor? I don't think so. So, okay, we'll see whether that one gets pulled off or not. And Greg Dworkin actually has been following real news, giving us the pleasant Skype tones here to introduce things. Let's just get right to it, because I can't keep you sitting around fantasizing about Elizabeth Warren all day long. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Good morning. I just want to know if he was a pool boy also.
It doesn't say as much, but I'm betting pizza delivery man, pool boy, something quite along those lines. I think the allegation, the part that's supposed to be terribly, terribly wrong, is that in more of her spare time, she was spending her time trolling the websites where she could solicit sexual favors for pay, you see. So, she's been busy when she's not in front of the cameras or traveling between cameras. She's able to do this. She's got a lot of energy. She's no slacker.
She's got the energy of a mom of 5 children, each of whom is doing a different sport, or at least that's what I learned from Saturday Night Live over the weekend. I think that's probably true.
Yes, probably so. Well, there are a lot of things that are not true, and those are in the news today, too.
Yeah, a lot of them have to do with Donald Trump, but there are things that are true as well. But I'm actually going to start with a quick recap of Israeli elections.
Oh, those guys.
Remember those guys?
I do.
So the quick recap,
yes,
abbreviated pundit roundup of Israel is this. There was an election, and it was non-determinative. It was not definitive. And the president of Israel gave Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu, first crack at forming a government. He couldn't. He failed. So it then went to Benny Gantz, and Benny Gantz is in the process of trying to put together a unity government that would include the 2 big winners, which is the Likud party of Benjamin Netanyahu and his own blue and white party. Benny Gantz is co-leader of the blue and white party is a fellow named Lapid. And so they're trying to decide, okay, if we get together and we're unified, what does that mean? Because Netanyahu wants to bring in all the right-wing religious parties, and blue and white formed exactly in opposition to that. And the third, smaller party of Avigdor Lieberman is very secularist, even though it's very right-wing. So he's not going to join either one, and he wants the 2 big parties to get together and form a unity government.
No, really?
And most of Israel does, because they don't want to have a third election, which is what would happen if this can't happen. So that's where we left it. And what's happened is that Netanyahu is in really serious trouble. He's starting to get rumors and vibes of Likud saying, okay, we'll join blue and white, but without the religious parties and without Netanyahu if he won't agree. And he can't agree because the religious parties are the source of his strength. And so this got Netanyahu all upset and said, I'm going to have a snap primary, not just a snap election, but a snap primary.
Oh, can you?
And I'll show you that Likud considers me Bibi the king of Israel.
Wow.
And he did this in order to prove that he has such strength that nobody should ever even consider running against him. because he is the one indispensable person. The problem is people have already said, okay, I'll run against you. And that kind of spoils the strategy.
Womp womp.
Right?
Yes.
So Elon Levy tweets this morning, ignore the noise around Likud leadership primary. Whoever runs, there's only one question. Do you either depose Netanyahu and form a unity government or keep Netanyahu and go to a third election? So that's the maneuvering that's going on. Whatever you hear coming out, Netanyahu will say, oh, well, we could have formed a unity government. Everybody wants me, including my opposition, except for this fellow Lapid, Benny Gantz's partner. And Lapid just got up in front of a microphone and said, I'm not in consideration. I'm not the roadblock. I will not be in the rotation for prime minister. It's got to be between Gantz and Netanyahu. And the thing is, Gantz is holding out for, okay, but I go first. Netanyahu is holding out that he himself goes first because being prime minister is the only way he can avoid the indictment stuff that's already started and is going on right now. So Netanyahu is not getting his way in terms of everybody agreeing he goes first. His own party is starting to talk about what happens post-Netanyahu. The indictment stuff is going on. He's really in a bad position dealing from weakness, not strength. He tried to do this a public relations thing showing that nobody would dare run against him, and it turns out that's not true. There are people who are willing to run against him. And still the question on the table is there going to be a government without him, or is there going to be a third election? But, the way he's maneuvering looks like a lot of his supposed strength is now looking like weakness. And, the odds are that he's not going to be the next prime minister. But we'll have to see. There's a lot of this to run out. So you got the Israeli Trump in trouble. And, of course, you have our local Trump in trouble. And, that's the way to start the morning.
Is the English Trump still in trouble?
The English Trump is also still in trouble. Boris Johnson just had a party meeting, and he basically put out this idea that what would happen is that he's going to come up with a suddenly new plan that the Europeans will accept, and so he'll get the Brexit he wants with a deal.
Oh, a deal Brexit.
A deal Brexit all of a sudden, but he's totally prepared to do a no-deal Brexit.
Yeah.
Should that occur?
All right. Well, I mean, there's really, what else could he say? I mean, he was mandated to do a deal. He'll say, I'll do a deal, but I'll also not do a deal. Whatever happens, happens. We'll see what happens. Well,
right. So one of the conservatives
English accent.
Who is into Brexit tweeted, the UK government has made significant compromises to help find a deal. The EU now need to follow suit and respond constructively. This is in the best interest of everybody, and it might well be our last chance. And Ian Dunt answered that with, well, it hasn't, they don't, it isn't, and it won't be.
Oh. Well, that was quick.
Right. So the other side of it is that Boris Johnson is trying to turn on the charm, do a charm offensive, and be incredibly sweet. Because he was incredibly obnoxious last week in front of the parliament that opened up again despite his best efforts.
Right.
He was being loud, he was being boorish, he was being accusatory, he was being inflammatory, calling the law that was passed to force him to try to get a deal as the Surrender Act, and doing all sorts of other things to inflame the opposition to his policies. The problem with that is that Joe Cox, who was a member of the Commons, was killed over inflammatory stuff. It's like, in our country, it would be Gabby Gibbons was shot, and so right after that, Trump would be using language that would put a crosshair on people. It's that level of, this is really offensive, and especially offensive to friends and family of the slain Joe Cox. So Boris Johnson got in trouble for that, had to back down a little bit, and he's being super treacly, smarmy sweet this week in order to try to avoid apologizing, which he hasn't.
That is a skill he's got that the American Trump doesn't, so I guess he might as well try and use it. Trump can't even pretend.
Right, not anymore.
I like it.
For you Lord of the Rings fans, Trump is now Sauron after Numenor was drowned, and he cannot put on the semblance of fairness that he was able to prior to the tragedy. So that's exactly right. Trump is not able to do that. So coming back home, we had a couple of things that happened yesterday. Yes. Of course, the impeachment stuff is continuing. Today is the day that Kurt Volker is going to be deposed to the House over whatever happened in Ukraine. And we could talk about the real stuff. We could talk about the fake stuff. There's every day the Republicans and the conservatives and the media who are enabling them come up with some other controversy that clearly is going to be the end of the impeachment spectacle. Yes. Because here we've clearly shown that it's all a witch hunt. And every time they do that, it falls apart. So another one of those happened yesterday. It turned out that the whistleblower went to the CIA legal pathway in order to put his whistleblowing thing in, and got the feeling that that wasn't going anywhere. We've heard this story before. We've seen that movie before. So he went to Congress, as is prescribed by law, to get advice from the Intelligence Committee about what to do, giving them pretty vague, I have this concern. What do I do? And so they gave him advice, and he followed it. And so everything was done to the letter, say both his attorneys and the joint bipartisan heads of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who vouched for the fact that he followed protocol to the T, to the letter, did everything right.
It was perfect, in other words.
This was taken by the right-wing media as a sign that obviously he colluded with Schiff, and Schiff therefore must have written the whistleblower's complaint, because we all know that a CIA analyst can't do footnotes.
Right.
It's far too sophisticated for somebody like that.
Yeah.
It must have been a member of Congress. Right. Now, you have been staffed to a member of Congress. You will find that laughable. But that's the talking point, even though it falls apart on close inspection.
I mean, I guess essentially the big worry is they came to staffers and said, what do I do? And they said, okay, well, go to the inspector general. That's what the law says you're supposed to do. So they did that. But because the whistleblower contacted someone in Congress and gave them an inkling of what was up, that turned into Schiff knew, or Schiff knows who the whistleblower is, or Schiff wrote the whistleblower report.
I am not a lawyer, and I don't play one on TV, but let me tell you a story, because I love stories.
Right. Well, that's what we do here.
About 40 years ago, 35 years ago, when I was younger than I am now,
well, yes, that's
I went on a trip.
Okay.
Right? I took a trip. I was on vacation.
Okay. Yes.
I went overseas. I was in England.
Aha. You did Brexit.
And while I was away,
yes,
and this happened in New York City, while I was away,
35 years ago,
the travel broker that I had used to help arrange the transport.
You didn't just use Expedia?
It didn't exist then. Stole my credit card and used it for nefarious purposes.
Okay.
And got caught.
All right.
So I was asked to be a witness.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
I was a resident in medical school, so I put on my only suit and my one of two or three ties.
White coat.
And I went down to a Queens court at the behest of the assistant district attorney, and I was a witness for what happened.
Okay.
And so when you're a witness in one of these trials here, they have you sit outside the courtroom until it's your time to come in. And I'm sitting there on the bench with two other people. And people are walking back and forth in the hallway, and their ankles chained together. It's kind of an interesting place.
So Halloween.
And one of the guys I'm sitting next to looks at me and says, "Nice weather," and I shrugged.
All right.
Okay. And that was the extent of the conversation.
And it's
so now Trump. I go in and we do the, cross-examination. And the assistant DA asked me to tell what happened, which I did. And the defense lawyer skips everything about the actual facts of what happened and simply says, did you talk to anybody outside the courtroom before you came in here?
Uh-huh.
And I said, no, actually, I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
No, you didn't say a word to anybody? You didn't talk to the other people sitting on the bench next to you? I said, no. And that was pretty much it, and he was found guilty, and that was the end of it. And the purpose of the story is simply to tell you that when you don't have the facts, you try to find some procedural loophole to taint the witness and to otherwise throw smoke and mirrors at, in this case, the jury, but in our case, we're talking about the American public, who will ultimately be the jury. And that American public opinion will, in fact, drive whatever happens in Congress. And when you don't have the facts, you have to put up what Donald Trump on Twitter called bullshit.
Yeah, he did, and they said it was all okay, or they said it was okay for TV stations. Although they've been
so
moving
I guess
towards
therefore
that
it's
in a
okay
while.
for us. But
Yeah.
I'm simply saying, I'm well familiar with this thing, this concept here, and it doesn't work. If you have the facts and you do it right, then you get your conviction.
Okay.
And trying to put up this
Good. Hurry up.
procedural hurdle as somehow a stroke of genius is, in fact, a stroke of desperation.
Or it might just be a stroke that's happening.
Well, it could be. I mean, he almost had one yesterday during his news conference. So we had all of this going on. And then, of course, we had the news conference with the president of Finland, who really, as everybody pointed out on Twitter, wanted to be somewhere else and was gently trying to tell Trump that democracy is important. You ought to be defending it. And, of course, that went right over Trump's head.
Who cares?
And Jeff Mason, who was one of the two reporters, along with John Lemaire, who asked and pushed Trump about what happened at Helsinki, asked Trump about, what exactly did you really ask the president of Ukraine? And Trump flipped out and started literally screaming at him and said, you're supposed to be talking to the president of Finland. How dare you ask questions about that from me?
Yes.
You're fake news. You're all corrupt. You're all terrible. And it was really a I've lost it moment. And, again, you can speculate all you want to about the status of his mental health, and that's something of a discussion happening right now. But that, in fact, happened. So, again, to try to put you in the place where we seem to be before we even get to the polling that's come out this morning on impeachment and some other things. Here's Kyle Griffin tweeting a piece from Business Insider. This is all from the Pundit Roundup. The White House is paralyzed and teetering on the edge of a cliff in the wake of the whistleblower complaint, a White House official told Business Insider. A senior official described the mood within the White House as a Category 5 storm, although that was pretty evident on TV. CNN, Trump appears increasingly powerless to save himself from the historical scar of impeachment.
Yes.
Trump's foul mood leads him deeper into darkness. We have George Conway, unfit for office. Donald Trump's narcissism makes it impossible for him to carry out the duties of the presidency in the way the Constitution requires. Trump's erratic behavior has long been the subject of political criticism, late-night television jokes, and even speculation about whether it's part of some incomprehensible, multidimensional strategic game, but it's relevant to whether he's fit for the office he holds. Simply put, Trump's ingrained and extreme behavioral characteristics make it impossible for him to carry out the duties of the presidency in the way the Constitution requires. To see why, first requires a look at what the Constitution demands of a president, and then an examination of how Trump's behavioral characteristics preclude his ability to fulfill those demands.
Yes.
All right. Here's one from Politico. Trump's impeachment defines spooks key voting blocks. I think we'll go over that later. We have a rebuke from Australia, who basically said, we reject your characterization of what's going on. Don't forget, Barr and others are trying to ask them to be part of the conspiracy to get rid of the intelligence committee's credibility. Intelligence community's credibility. They're trying to do the whole Mueller report and undo it.
Yeah.
Okay. Josh Green has a really fascinating piece in Bloomberg Business Week. Trump's impeachment saga stems from a political hit job gone bad, and talks about the fact that the author of a book, Secret Empires, same author as Clinton Cash, got it all wrong. But that's where this whole Ukraine conspiracy about Biden comes from. Here's CNN saying GOP sources tell CNN they have no idea what else House Democrats' investigation will uncover or what comes next. And we have a wonderful example of how the media should handle Trump from Jim Roberts. Now, Margaret Sullivan has a terrific piece with impeachment looming. The news media is growing a spine. It needs stiffening, and she gives examples. But Jim Roberts, when he tweeted Pompeo, confirming that he was actually on that July 25th phone call that he lied about, Roberts says, after intentionally misleading Martha Raddatz and the American public, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo expects you to believe him when he says Trump is simply trying to help the new government of Ukraine build a successful and thriving economy.
Sure.
That's how reporters should handle their lies.
Yes, that's a start.
Right? We have Peter Wehner saying Pence is distancing himself from Trump on Ukraine. Rush is turning on Fox News. Rudy is throwing the State Department under the bus. Trump is lashing out in all directions at once, which is what he did yesterday in the televised news conference. This kind of thing happens when a scandal begins to consume a presidency. It will get worse. Leading to Tom Edsall questioning, will Trump ever leave the White House? We can deal with that a little bit.
Yeah. That's like the 50th person to ask that question, but it's worth repeating. I mean, the volume of serious columnists asking the question, and many of whom, note, I'm not the first. There's like 15 other people asking this question too. It's getting worrisome, to say the very least, but we'll...
Right, but again, right before the break, I just want to point out I've discovered the next set of coordinated talking points, which is guaranteed to derail this impeachment thing. Apparently, Robert Jeffress says Democrats worship the child-sacrificing demon god Moloch.
Yeah.
In fact, that is so well known that Todd Stern's radio host repeated that and got himself fired from Fox News for doing it.
Yeah, that was a wild card. I did not expect them to pull that one out so early, but
so that's your news summary.
Okay, gotta go worship. Be right back. Wow. Where was I on Monday? I should have been worshiping the moon god. Oh,
you should have.
This is a nonsense. All right. Too bad. All right.
So we packed all of that in before the break.
Pretty good.
We'll do impeachment stuff after the break.
Okay. We can do this.
All right, I'm going to start with the USA Today, and then we'll get to all the other stuff I have.
All right.
Here, let's do these. I'll put them all at the bottom there.
Okay.
These are going to be tweets, so you'll have to open them up.
Okay. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll continue on. Greg is with us. We have more impeachment news to round up. I am ready with your Skype feed of articles. Where do we want to begin?
So let's get started and jump right into it. Today, from USA Today, Susan Page writing up the story published at 5 a.m. Perilous times for Trump by 45 to 38. Americans support impeaching him over Ukraine allegations, poll finds.
Yes.
A plurality of Americans now support impeaching Trump and removing him from office. The partisan divide is huge, 74% of Democrats, but 17% of Republicans back impeachment. You know what? If we get 17% of Republicans, he's going to lose bigly.
Yeah, it was only 12 last time we talked. I mean, different poll.
By 2 to 1, those surveyed say there are valid reasons to investigate Joe Biden and his son for their behavior in Ukraine. Since there's nothing there, that's okay. Let them go ahead and do that. Americans by 45 to 38 plurality. If that's the price of impeaching Trump, good, go for it.
I am not attached. Yeah.
Because if there's nothing there, there's nothing there. Americans by a 45 to 38 plurality now support a vote by the House of Representatives to impeach Trump. A USA Today Ipsos polls find similar margin, 44 to 35. Those surveyed say the Senate should convict Trump and remove him from office. So this is an impeach and remove poll, which is important.
Yes.
Okay. Americans have long been wary of impeachment. The last one they did in June, this is USA Today, Suffolk University, different pollster, found opponents outweighing supporters by 2 to 1, 61 to 32. So that's quite a change. Okay.
Yes.
And most importantly, an overwhelming majority of Americans say that a president is subject to laws like any citizen. Public opinion might be tolerant, but there are limits. One more warning sign for Trump. Nearly 2/3 of Republicans say there isn't enough reliable information to decide whether he should be impeached. That leaves open the possibility that dramatic disclosures and persuasive evidence could convince some in Trump's own party that impeachment is warranted. Right? Democrats say they know enough. Republicans say, there isn't enough information. But that's not the same thing as in no case will I support anything. That's 24% from a previous poll.
Yeah.
24%, the Nixon number. The George W. Bush number when he left office is the core quarter of the country that no matter what are going to vote Republican because Democrats are godless Moloch worshipers. Right? But that's not the whole party. And so, again, you peel off a 10, 17%, 2/3 of the Republican Party who, at least on paper, are willing to say they're open-minded. You're in trouble. So that's USA Today out this morning. Morning Consult poll. 2 weeks ago, 36% for beginning impeachment proceedings, 49 against. Last week was 43-43. Now it's 46-43. Move of 16 net points in 2 weeks. And we haven't even started yet. Independents are now in favor of 43-39, and they're the key group, of course.
Yeah. I guess that helps answer the question of how much momentum for impeachment will be slowed by the recess.
Well, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff going on. You wouldn't even know they're in recess. They never cover what Congress is doing anyway.
And that's true.
So it doesn't feel like they're in recess because Adam Schiff is speaking and people are being deposed. The Inspector General for State Department was there yesterday bringing information that Rudy Giuliani had put together a propaganda portfolio faking the seal of the President of the United States in order to discredit the previous ambassador to Ukraine who wasn't cooperating with the Trump administration. That's what the State Department IG brought to Congress because it arrived in their lap and they didn't know what the heck to do with it.
Okay. By the way, we can make everything easier by adopting the fun nickname I saw somebody put out there for Rudy Colludi, which will help keep the collusion word in the news. And Trump loves nicknames. So
Right. So it's all part of the Ukrainian scandal. But in that morning consult poll, 24% of voters said there's almost nothing Trump could do that would cause me to support impeaching and removing him from office. In other words, 24% of voters are all in on the cult of Trump, where they will blindly follow him until the bitter end, says Josh Jordan, who's a conservative poll watcher, who's all part of the Romulan neutral zone on Twitter, where we all trade polls with each other. And, again, that's that 24% statistic I was citing. It's not fake news, folks, but that's not enough. That poll says get rid of him. And my other Romulan neutral zone poll follower, Brandon, says this is a new YouGov poll that finds voters think the House should impeach real Donald Trump by double-digit margin. Should or shouldn't impeach? Should 50, shouldn't 39. They say Trump should be removed from office by an even larger margin, should 51, shouldn't 39. Okay? And so if you're looking at that breakdown, among all voters, 51-39, Democrats say should or should not remove him from office. Democrats say should remove him from office 83-8, Independents 40-33, and Republicans 13-76. So again, there's 13% of Republicans who would go along with that. Yes, and that's in politics is also known as losing.
Yeah, okay. Once you put it all together.
Right. So those recent polls, you can take all the polls and make an aggregate out of it, and 538 has done just that.
Well,
so with all the new polls, 46.6% support impeachment, 44.9% don't support impeachment. But, and you can't stress this enough, this is at the beginning. We're only starting. And just it's September 9th, okay, a month ago.
Yeah.
It was 53% don't support, 38% support. That's flipped, and it's now 47-45 do it. And if you look by party, because they're also doing by party, back in, let's pick a date, September 10th, 69% of Democrats were for impeachment. That's up to 79. So Democrats have gained 10 points. Okay, September 10th, 34% of independents said do it. Now it's up to 42. On September 10th, this is all polls, 8% of Republicans say to do it. Now it's 13. So each one of those categories, Democrats, independents, and Republicans, have moved toward impeachment. We haven't even gotten started. And when you compare this to where Nixon was on impeachment in his day, we're a little bit ahead. The public's a little bit ahead of where they were in Nixon days. In other words, people see this as a serious thing. They're taking it seriously, and Trump can blow all the hot air and smoke he wants, and his enablers in the media can do it. And, the Hugh Hewitts of the world and the Rush Limbaughs of the world are not really going to convince the public that there's nothing there. The public sees it as something there, and that's why they're moving in that direction. What Trump did was serious. It was a serious thing. And that's why the one sentence summaries of what's going on here matter so much.
Well, yes, it's been pretty amazing what's happened in the last couple of days and the attempts that they've made to undermine this thing, and that's only made it worse. I mean, this is seriously one of those situations of the stop digging advice is the best thing you could possibly give them, but they cannot help themselves. It's been amazing watching, I guess, the yesterday's stunt with all of the information that the state inspector general brought forward that came, I guess, at some point from Rudy, but then the big question is, what's the provenance of this stuff prior to Rudy? No one believes Rudy is, capable of digging this stuff up on his own. Someone's handing it to him. Who is it is the next big question. I think we got to a good set of suspects in yesterday's pre-taped show, reading about the people he's been working with most closely, the Ukrainian-American businessmen, legitimate businessmen, of course, who have been working closely with him and feeding him this information. But as it happens, there may be more than one line for bringing this garbage in, and we'll have to see who got a hold of what, when, and who reached Rudy first. Was it these two Ukrainian nuts? Was it what's his name? The author of the Clinton Cash
Peter,
book. I can't recall his name offhand, but I recognized it as the Clinton Cash guy. I have a feeling that he too got this information either direct. I don't know whether he got it directly from the same source as Rudy, but once it had been injected into the right-wing, nutosphere, it got recycled.
John Solomon is the other way to inject it into the right-wing nutosphere, but usually it all comes from Russia.
Ultimately, it all seems to come out that way. They know very well what right-wing nutters would like to see. And they feed it to him.
Peter Schweitzer is the author.
Yes,
I can never remember because he's not that important, but it's the Clinton cash guy, and that's the important thing.
Right, which means he's Bannon's guy, which is also important.
Right.
And
which is why I said it came from Russia.
Yeah, right. And I think that's largely been the case. The other angle that yesterday's...
And this is, by the way, just a reminder that the Ukraine story, small, is the Russian story, large. It's the same story. It's just that Ukraine is understandable.
Right. And I mean, if you can't... you would have heard that by now 100 times on the show, but if you're brand new to the show, I mean, I guess unless you're an area expert, you want a quick and dirty, not scientific reason to believe that this is the case and that there's a relationship between the two stories. Sit some Russians and Ukrainians down and have them speak to you in whatever language they choose, and then I'll ask you which one's the Ukrainian and which one's the Russian. And if you can tell them apart, I'll listen to you about why they need to be separate stories, but I bet you can't. And not only that, they'll tell you the same story, which is the more important part. But another angle that came out from the weird briefing that happened yesterday is another recurring theme here on the show and in my Twitter stream. Never, ever get caught believing Trump paperwork when it gets handed to you. They came with forged paperwork yesterday. Apparently, Rudy handed over some kind of envelope on which he hand wrote or clipped from somewhere and photocopied and pasted on a White House letterhead facsimile on this stuff as though it had actually come from the White House. That's about as blatant a crime as you could possibly... I can't imagine that on its own doesn't get you in trouble. Though I guess he could be pardoned for that. And it went further than that. It wasn't just cutting out pieces of White House letterhead and pasting it onto envelopes so that people thought it was official documents. Now it's finally, I guess it's dawning on everybody that the non-transcript transcript that got released about the phone call with the Ukrainian president is also fake, essentially. We'll see how fake it turns out to be, but people noticed right away, and for some reason it has taken other people a week to notice that there's only about 10 minutes of conversation in the transcript on a 30-minute phone call, and that the phone call was conducted in English because Zelensky speaks fluent English. I guess that's something you have to do as a comedian. His day job requires his fluency in English because there isn't comedy in other languages, as you know. And but apparently, good 2/3 of the conversation is actually missing, which would help answer the question of what happened to the 8 times that Trump supposedly asked Zelensky to do us a favor. Well, they were mostly edited out. But apparently this is news to some people are waking up to the fact that this thing is only 10 minutes long, and turns out to be that the ellipses have been selectively inserted. No one knows what's missing. And even the White House itself is turning out White House fakes. So, like I said, never believe Trump paperwork is almost assuredly lying to you if it's written down.
Right. Well, so it's labeled Memorandum of Telephone Conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think it says somewhere at the top that this is not a word-for-word transcript.
Yes, which, of course, led Trump to insist yesterday that it was,
a word-to-word transcript, exactly. So,
so
we're
I don't know
going
what to do with it.
See that, and, of course, that's all part of it. Speaking of word-for-word, these very short letters back and forth from Australia that were released are pretty interesting. This one is 28 May 2019 to the Honorable William P. Barr, Attorney General of the United States, Department of Justice. I would love to see that address change, but it is what it is for now. Dear Attorney General, I refer to President Trump's announcement on 24 May that you will investigate the origins of the FBI probe into Russian links in the 2016 U.S. election, just in case it's not clear what Barr is doing. I note that the President referred to Australia, the United Kingdom, and the Ukraine as potential stakeholders. Moreover, I note that he has declassified intelligence material to support your investigation, so we'll cooperate as best we can, while Australia's former High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, the Honourable Alexander Downer, is no longer employed by the government. We stand ready to provide you with all relevant information to support your inquiries. The acting White House Chief of Staff, the Honorable Michael Mulvaney, has been copied on this letter, so now they're all involved. Thank you.
Yes. Acting! That's right.
And in response, from the Embassy of Australia, October 2, 2019, so just very, very recently.
Yesterday, which was 4 days ago in Australia.
Yeah. Senator Lindsey Graham, Chairman, Committee on the Judiciary, United States Senate, 290 Russell Senate Office Building. You know what that is. This is from the Honorable Joe Hockey, and it says, Dear Chairman Graham, thank you for your letter to the Prime Minister of October 2nd, 2019. I am responding on his behalf. I can assure you that the Australian government is cooperating with Attorney General Barr's inquiry. I note we have been public about our willingness to cooperate. Mm-hmm. We gave this undertaking on our own initiative to the Attorney General in the attached letter of May 28th, 2019.
It's a lot of numbers.
Okay. So you're asking us what's going on here. We're telling you we already did this.
Yeah.
And then he says, in your letter, that is the Graham letter, you made mention of the role of an Australian diplomat. We reject your characterization of his role.
Yeah, you're rejected in your face.
As you have requested, we'll work closely with the Attorney General to resolve any misunderstandings in this matter. I'd love to know what Lindsay said. All I have is the response. Thank you very much for your letter yesterday trying to put pressure on us in order to dig up dirt on your intelligence community for the basis of protecting your crooked president.
Yes.
We reject it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Where you have the? I mean, I've seen these things, but I don't have them handy. So if you will send whatever links you have to those, or I don't see them in the roundup.
I will give them to you.
I know I've seen them, so I believe you. But
right,
other people doubt you, and I'm going.
Other people doubt me. Well, it's from a tweet, and I'll let's see, just finding the original tweet where it came from.
Okay. Well,
and that's in the roundup.
Oh, all right.
Itself.
How come I can't find the roundup? I'm scrolling so I wouldn't bother you with this.
It's a really long thing, so I'm not surprised it doesn't show up. But I'll find
there
it
it
for
is.
you.
I got you.
It's from
Joe
Grant
Hockey.
Stern.
Yeah, and
I'll give you this thing right here,
Joe
so you
Hockey.
can find it easy.
Is that like a?
And there it is. And
Okay.
it's within that. It's a Joe Hockey tweet. And Joe Hockey was the person who wrote the letter. So I think, and he's got a blue
Sounds
check.
like a
So I think it's
Snoopy
okay.
character, Joe Hockey.
So I don't think that Rudy Giuliani made up these letters.
Not those. Well, maybe. I mean, you would think if he was going to make up letters that he would make up ones that would help. So, but he's a very dumb guy.
You'd think.
I do think that, and so it's possible that he may have screwed that up. But yeah, that's the new conspiracy theory or a rewriting of history that they hope will dismiss this whole thing. Is I think we all remember George Papadopoulos got drunk in London and blurted out to an Australian diplomat that he had met that the reason I'm so happy and drunk is I'm hanging out here in London. Pretty soon I'm going to get dirt on Hillary Clinton that's going to win the election for Donald Trump. And this guy, I guess that's Downey, or Downer, I guess, who no longer works for the Australian government, who, called home. AD phoned home and said a guy just said he was going to get dirt on Hillary Clinton from the Russians. And maybe we should tell the FBI about that. And that's how this whole thing actually started.
Right.
Originally, they thought it was...
Plus, of course, Christopher Steele, who is British, wrote the dossier and gave that to our intelligence community in terms of what's going on.
Right.
And so that's why Australia said, look, I know you mentioned Australia and the United Kingdom.
Right.
And so that's why those two particular countries were on Bill Barr's let's see if we can make stuff up list.
Yes, that's true. My other working theory is that Trump has made the list, and Trump is making the list based on who speaks English, because he needs to be able to, do a little subtle, like, I'm asking you for a favor, but not a quid pro quo, wink, wink. And they have to be able to understand what does wink, wink mean. And if you're translating into, whatever, Belarus.
I can imagine.
They don't get it.
The foreign leaders who are getting translation of this saying, I understand he wants a favor. What is this wink? What is the word for wink?
Yeah, right. So they're giving
is
the
he
wrong
twitching
answer
his
to
nose
that.
like bewitched? What is this?
Not so. Yeah, right. So if you don't get the subtleties of his having learned how to deal with people from mafia movies, and not all English speakers are going to get that either. And,
Right.
and so
In
hence
our
you end up
country,
spilling
winking
the beans.
means surrendering. What does this mean?
Right. Yeah, right. I think he's propositioning you, sir. That's weird. Although I have heard he just thinks when you're a star, you can do it. He tried that on the Finnish president the other day. Put his hand on his knee. He got smacked.
Right.
That's pretty good. All right. So that's part of the theory. I'm serious. You should hold on to that. I think that he's looking to get this cooperation from people with whom he can converse in English, and that cuts down on the number of people's notes that he has to eat and misunderstandings via translation. He doesn't want his criminal conspiracy lost in translation.
Right. I sent you a picture.
Okay.
Of Trump sitting next to the poor, embattled Finnish
right
gentleman, the president
rakes
of
versus
Finland.
Snakes. The Rakes
And it
versus
pretty
Snakes
much,
summit.
encapsulizes the entire press conference. Trump is red in the face, screaming at the camera. And the president of Finland is trying to pretend he's not there and seeing if he can crawl into his seat any deeper.
It's pretty amazing. It's an incredible shot. I think I saw Darth. His caption for it was like the Finnish president was saying, "Is that my Uber? I think that's my Uber. I have to go."
Right. It's her. Darth is a she.
Oh, I did not know that. Mm-hmm. Well, no wonder. Nothing at all. But I think everybody
is brilliant.
I'm still good at that. Okay, she is, and I am. 500 years old. Everybody's a he.
Yeah, that's how it works. All right, so that's pretty much my summary.
Darth never told me.
As best as I can do. A whole lot happened. This was it. And you know what? More's going to happen today. Kurt Volker is spilling the beans behind closed doors today.
Yes.
People will have a much better idea of what's going on. There's going to be more panic in the White House, and you never know what's going to happen. And they'll come up with some reason why Trump is going to turn this around because he's a stable genius. He referred to himself as such during the press conference, so we know it's true. And, he's in trouble. So we'll follow the polls. We'll follow the story. We'll follow the news. And we'll see what's going on. And that'll take us through just about the first hour of this show. You can summarize all the things that are going to happen in the next hour in the news. And I will be back on Monday, assuming you are.
Yeah, that's a pretty good assumption. By the way, I am assuming that you wrote the whistleblower complaint because you somehow had a tip that Darth was a she. So I think that that must be
we colluded.
something.
It's collusion.
She never told me that, but we have no actual relationship, and so therefore I can perhaps that's the reason I never got that memo. Okay.
Let's go back to the original story I told about being in a Bronx in a Queens courthouse, right?
Yes,
because the defense attorney could have said to the judge, "I reject any evidence here because obviously this witness is in collusion with the assistant DA."
Yeah. I thought you were going to find out that the lawyer was the one.
This is how it's done. No, you're in collusion because obviously you're working together. You have the same point of view. Well, if that's your approach to the law, how do you expect to get anything done ever?
I do not.
And the
know.
answer is, I don't.
Well, all right. Well, then
why don't you say that on the record so the judge knows where we're coming from here?
I thought though that you were going to tell us that you didn't speak to anybody. No, I didn't. Well, what about the person who talked to you about the weather? I know because that was me.
I didn't speak. That's right.
Yeah, right. You had that good answer. You didn't do anything. I was wondering whether the lawyer himself was walking around and talking to everybody to see which witnesses could he taint that way.
Yeah. He was in the courtroom at the time, but it could have been one of his associates.
Right. Second chair there. Okay. Very good. Well, thanks, Greg. we'll catch up again, but there's going to be a couple of days in between then and now. And
well, we're getting used to that. We did that this week.
Yeah.
The State of the Union every 3 days. That's really the way we should do it from now on, the way the news cycles work.
Right. It's a good show name. Better than the one we've got. Okay.
All righty. Take care. I'll talk to you.
Thanks. All right. See you after the weekend. I have a chuckle in the background here. I just had to retweet just so that you could all, if you're listening live and you heard me laugh out loud inappropriately about a minute ago, it's because I have seen and now retweeted I don't know what this is, a passerby in Twitter retweeted into my timeline by someone else who follows, but who follows this person. I don't know anything about him, but I guess in response to what must be White House pushback about their various forgeries is video of, I don't even know what this is video of, Trump doing something. Maybe this is from yesterday's presser with the Finnish president or whatever, but they've taken the video and put one of those kooky filters on where, people are messing around and they make videos of themselves and they put on filters that replace their eyes and nose with, like an animal nose and whiskers and stuff. And this one has these kooky eyes that are googly eyes that are pointing in different directions. It's fun. I don't know what the substance of it is, but I thought I would send it around. I tweeted around. It says, this video has not been altered in any way, which is almost certainly what the White House is saying about the various things. And, wow, it's pretty crazy. Now, let's see. Our second hour is coming up here. We're going to go on our break in about a minute. Actually, though I thought we weren't going to be able to make it happen because we missed yesterday's visit with a live show visit with Joan McCarter, she's threatened, at least, to possibly come by and discuss things. It may be that she's just bursting with comments to make about the craziness of the last 2 days, and it's hard to imagine any of you aren't. So it's entirely possible that she may decide that she needs to break in, and we couldn't do better than to have her on at this point. I'd love to know what's going on in the thinking personally and what she's talking to others about at Daily Kos, so it would be fantastic to have her on. No pressure if you're too busy. I think my guess would be that the pressure to continue processing content for the front page is just too much. And so, anyway, it's Thursday and you're under no obligation, Joan, obviously. But if you just can't wait, I just can't wait. So we'd be well matched in that. And all right, when we pick things up on the other side, whether Joan is able to join us or not, I'll try and get a handle on some of the hottest stuff that's happening this morning, try and dive back into some of the things that didn't make the air before, and I think maybe the best source of this will be Twitter stream rather than Pocket, but I don't know. Watch me try and organize in real time after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I wanted to listen to what was the video that had been altered actually about, And by the way, when I opened it up, I could see that in addition to the googly eyes and animal nose, he's got giraffe ears and then the little giraffe horns. And in addition to all of this, they have electronically altered the voice so that it is high and very squeaky. It is it's Trump's rejection of his denial, his predicted denial of the substance of the was it New York Times story that I read to you in the end of yesterday's tape show, in which, of course, the president was said to have demanded the moot, as he called it yesterday, stuffed, as he said, as he was denying it yesterday on Twitter, a moot stuffed with snakes and alligators, as well as the spikes on top of the wall and electrified fence and all that. So he's denying all of that stuff as predicted, but with a wacky voice. And I think maybe I should give you a sample of it by calling it up here on the main computer and cranking up the audio as best I can, because it's just, I think the person videotaped with their phone the output of their laptop. So it was a little difficult to hear, but let me see what it sounds like on the air.
A moat. And in the moat, I wanted alligators and snakes. And I wanted the wall to be a fence. And I wanted to be electrified. And I wanted sharp spikes at the top. So
I mean, if you could see this thing, well, hopefully if you're listening live, you will have listened to the video yourself, because it's a scream, especially without the context of his denying it. But starting out, and I want a moat, and it was filled with snakes and alligators, and the eyes, it's just unbelievable. If you're listening via podcast, not yet, you're not, but you will be later, I'm going to have to include a link to this video, the tweet with the video in it, so that you can hear. That was very difficult to hear, I think, on the air, but maybe you got the sense of the squeaky voice anyway. And if you did, congratulations to you. I hope you enjoyed it. All right, let's see. I got to reset all of my windows here so that we have the soundboard available in case there's breaking news for which we need to play any special sound effects. All the fantastic things that we have, including our horror dramatic sound and of course the acting thing. We're probably going to have to go to that at some point today too. All right, let's see. We'll try and keep Twitter open and functioning. It was crashed out yesterday. Did any of you suffer from the loss of TweetDeck yesterday? And there's a new update on the phone app on Twitter, which has crashed out the ability to include photos from your photo stream on your phone. You got to reverse engineer this stuff. That's a story that we could talk about. The reason I brought that up, I was trying to send out a picture of a couple of tweets side by side that revealed another interesting new pattern that I thought maybe we should keep an eye on. Where is this? I just happened to see this morning Josh Marshall tweeting about this. Yeah, here we go. The tweet I grabbed was, well, I can go back to his original tweet and see what he's talking about here. Is a little backstory, he says, on the legal advisor at the center of the state IG briefing. He joined state. Remember, this is the person, in case you've lost the track of this story, this is the person, I guess, who brought forth the packet of information. Well, no, was it him that brought forth the packet of information? I'm not even sure. But he was, I guess, involved in things yesterday. We had was it the state IG, the Department of State Inspector General, who brought forward the packet of information I guess he says he got from Giuliani that had the fake White House envelope included, and this was supposedly all the information that Trump and Barr and later Giuliani all want investigated. This is what they're pestering heads of state around the world about corroborating. And the upshot is that this packet of information is just stuffed full of lunatic conspiracy nonsense that's circulating in the right-wing nutosphere and nowhere else, because it's not true. It's the grossest possible perversions of grains of truth that themselves are only half true to begin with. And they're wasting the time of almost the entirety of the American government with this stuff. Now wasting the time of vast swaths of foreign governments as well. And I guess the legal advisor somehow, or is he the maybe he's the general counsel, or maybe just an acting general counsel to the state inspector general, or what? But Josh Marshall tweets, let's see, this would have been yesterday afternoon. Little backstory on the legal advisor at the center of the state IG briefing, which was all crazy in its own right. He joined the state in a non-legal position in 2017, 3.5 years after passing the bar. Then he was promoted to, yes, there we are, acting chief lawyer for the entire State Department. That would make him the general counsel for the State Department. That was just one tweet. He followed it up by saying, what I'm hearing is that for once, this might have backfired, turning him into a Succession / Greg type character. I'm not watching the Succession miniseries so far that they have on HBO, but everyone else is, and so maybe I'll have to at some point. Maybe you are, and you know what that means. Eager to be part of the gang, less eager to go to jail. Mark Schmidt, an old hand at these things, commenting on that. This is nuts. Legal advisor at the State Department is probably the most prestigious legal job in the executive branch outside of DOJ and White House counsel. It's a job that people leave top law school deanships for, like Harold Coe, or federal judgeships, giving the example of Abe Sofer. I am not familiar with him, because it's incredibly consequential. And yet, it was given to this person 3.5 years out of law school, and who had joined the State Department just 2 years ago in a non-legal capacity. That was really weird, and it reminded me of something, even though this was happening at State, and the thing it reminded me of was happening at a different department. But I wanted to put these two tweets side by side. The other tweet was from Sasha Samberg Champion, who is according to the Twitter bio here, a civil rights lawyer, former government lawyer, emphasis on former, it says. And he wrote back on September 18th about a similar situation, saying when you, now does this thread stretch back? How far back? All right, it goes back to something, an article from the New York Times about something going on at the Homeland Security Department, not State, but he tweets, when you suddenly fire an agency's general counsel, apparently the general counsel over at Homeland Security has just been cleared out. Presumably that means you're planning to do things that are very legal. And including the New York Times reporting here, White House fires Homeland Security Department's general counsel. The firing of John Mitnick is the latest in a year of turnover at the Department of Homeland Security. Now, of course, lots going on at the Department of Homeland Security that could fall under suspicion of being the sort of thing that isn't legal and that anybody experienced would know isn't legal. And after a few other emails here, or posts in this Twitter stream, the second one reading, when people are offering to different spin about who got the agency counsel fired, presumably that means they're planning to do things that are very legal, including a clip from the aforementioned New York Times article. Another clip is accompanied with the comment, when the White House and the agency are telling different stories about who will take over as agency counsel, presumably that means the agency is about to do things that are very legal. And then finally, this is indeed often the reason that agency counsel gets fired. One can draw reasonable inferences here. He's referring now to a Southpaw tweet at the time that says one reason lawyers sometimes get fired is because they insist that something which someone powerful wants to do is against the law. There are other reasons, but that is one. And then finally, I said finally on the last one, and I was wrong. Finally, the tweet that I actually was comparing with Josh's said, when you try to install a new agency general counsel who is barely out of law school, presumably that means you plan to do things that are very legal. This time referring to the tweet of Austin Evers, executive director of American Oversight, as it happens, who was tweeting earlier that day, the new acting general counsel at the Department of Homeland Security graduated college in 2010, graduated from law school in 2013, and practiced law for less than 1 year before joining the administration. How do you like that? So, happening at Department of Homeland Security and not Department of State, but apparently the same thing going on in both places, and I would imagine likely the case in other departments as well. So multiple departments, actually both, I think, implicated in the Ukraine scandal, but plenty of reasons outside of Ukraine for the current administration to insist on having inexperienced and pliable legal counsel. So just another thing to keep an eye on. I don't have the ultimate fallout of that, but you should be aware of it, and I feel like it's the kind of thing that will pay off later. I guess there's now, today we'll be spending time, just like we're waiting for everybody to catch up on the fact that the non-transcript transcript that isn't word for word, that Trump says is word for word, and therefore couldn't possibly be word for word, is incomplete. We can also wait, I think, for people to catch up on what is the provenance of the information that was revealed at yesterday's otherwise baffling briefing with the State Department. As of last evening, I was watching people tweet that the actors on Capitol Hill who took in this briefing from State were at a loss for where this packet of disinformation actually originated. Where was it coming from? Rudy Giuliani was the messenger. Where was he getting it? And I see mixed signals, some people pointing to the Peter Schweitzer book. My guess is that that was even too far-fetched for Schweitzer and that he didn't do the digging here. I think the answer comes from yesterday's show, that Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, the two Ukrainian-American quote-unquote businessmen who are dealing so closely with Giuliani, are behind this. And my working theory is, first of all, the theory that they are the source for the information is not my theory. It is the theory, I think, combined of, BuzzFeed, the OCCRP, and the Miami Herald, whose pieces I read to you yesterday, that make it pretty plain that they're comfortable saying that these guys are the source of a lot of Rudy's information and stories. I don't know whether they're directly connected to whatever was physically included in that bundle of information revealed inside the fake envelope yesterday. But my working theory, I think outlined in yesterday's show also, and outlined last night on Twitter, is I think you can make this understandable to the public by pointing out, I took my cue from Trump, who tweeted out yesterday he was so pleased and proud of himself to have found something via Twitter that he ended up getting taken down because it was a copyright violation in the way it was presented. But he was trying to say, look, here's a picture of, who was even in the picture? I can't even recall. But it was a picture of Biden, the two Bidens involved in this story, Hunter and Joe, with what they were alleging, I guess, without actually identifying the person, was one of the executives from Burisma, the Ukrainian energy concern on which on whose board Hunter Biden sat, controversially enough. And I didn't recognize the guy. I assume, although why I would assume that Donald Trump was telling the truth about anything, that was actually such a person. And I had to respond by sending out the picture of Trump and Giuliani with Parnas and Fruman, which it would be accurate to say, as I did, here's a picture of you with not one but two executives from a Ukrainian gas company. The big accusation here was, here's Hunter Biden and Joe Biden with an executive from a Ukrainian gas company, as though there were only one. But here's a picture of you and Giuliani with two. And remember that the business concern at the moment, besides all of the previously bankrupted businesses, just like Trump, that Parnas and Fruman were involved in, they are now in the business of exporting mostly American liquid natural gas. And I say they're in the business of it. I think it's just theoretical. I don't know whether they have actually moved any gas from anywhere to Ukraine. They just have designs on doing so. And I think, as we outlined in yesterday's show, the war with Russia has disrupted supplies of energy, in particular natural gas, to Ukraine, which I think was being brought there via pipeline from, I think they have like the Trans-Siberian pipeline here that runs all the way into Europe and supplies a lot of Europe with Russian natural gas. And I guess that has somehow been disrupted in supplying most of Ukraine because war. And anybody who can fill the gap, I guess, and keep the rest of Ukraine running on fossil fuel, now that the war is disrupting this supply, could stand to make a killing. Why? They could be war profiteers. So it would be awfully valuable to be able to supply Ukraine with natural gas in the absence of a regular supply of Russian natural gas, which is dependent on the continuation of this war between Russia and Ukraine, though Russia would be willing to end this war if Ukraine would surrender. They don't care enough about lining the pockets of the various oligarchs or would-be oligarchs like Parnas and Fruman. But anyway, I think a better and more understandable story about these two is they stood to make a killing if one or more of the big players, incumbent players in the gas market in Ukraine, was under investigation for massive corruption, or they all got arrested, or anybody having to do with them got arrested, and they were therefore unable to supply their energy product to Ukraine, and that would just make the opening for Parnas and Fruman that much bigger. In other words, their main competition in Ukraine just happened to be the people that they told the American government were insanely corrupt and had to be arrested right away. Now, that happens to have the ancillary benefit of helping Trump with his current lunatic theory about how he shouldn't be in trouble and how there really was never any Russian collusion. The only collusion was Ukrainian, and on behalf of Hillary Clinton, and maybe now on behalf of Hunter Biden as well. That's helpful to Trump, so great. So what does Trump do for Fruman and Parnas? Don't know exactly, but if they were looking to export American natural gas, I am sure that the President of the United States, acting on their behalf, could make it that much easier for them to do and to make much more money doing it. So I think that's an alternative explanation that makes a hell of a lot of sense, and I would not be surprised. I would be surprised if anybody follows up on it and develops it into a compelling story, because that would be good news for us and would help, I think, close things out on this chapter. And no one ever takes my advice for these things. It takes years for people to come around to my advice on these things. Just one of many examples, though. I think we're ahead of things, but that's because I'm free to speculate and members of Congress on Capitol Hill are not. they have to pretend to be baffled about the provenance of this information that showed up in yesterday's briefing. Okay, one update from the Washington Post on Donald Trump's crazy plans for the border. Apparently, I don't know whether this was missed or I missed it in the New York Times thing, but the Post says in their story on Trump's plans for the border, there's an additional detail. Trump wanted to have U.S. forces equipped with bayonets to stop migrants at the border, among other ideas. So snakes, alligators, trenches, flesh-rending spikes, hot black paint, electrification, shoot them in the legs to slow them down, and if that didn't do the trick, you should stick them with a bayonet, which I'm not really sure why, what the bayonet adds to anything, but just cruelty being the point, as we've learned all along. I suppose there could be that as well. Naturally, he denies all of that, but just so you know, if you're listing the crazy things that Trump wanted to have happen at the border, you can add bayonets to the list. And I don't even know if the comedic value of bayonets outweighs, it's going to be about alligators and snakes, I think, going forward. Okay. There were two stories on the effort by Peter Schweitzer to reinforce this dirt on Biden angle out there. I think Greg mentioned one of them being from Bloomberg. And let's see, I've got that one. Bloomberg Business Week. Trump's impeachment saga stems from a political hit job gone bad. I know he mentioned that story. That one is Joshua Green's reporting for Bloomberg. I also have out here a competing piece that appears to make the same argument. Lachlan Markay from, where is he from? Daily Beast, with his article that he tweeted around this morning. His tweet saying, new this morning, the Peter Schweitzer book that largely fueled Trump world's corruption allegations against the Bidens lifted a number of passages from Wikipedia. So in addition to it being garbage accusations, it's garbage research behind it. The fact that it lifted a lot of its information from Wikipedia, well, that would get you in trouble with a college paper, much less with a book, but it's a wild story, but I guess if you're still looking for the original provenance of this information, the fact that he got it from Wikipedia only tells us that it was already out there from somewhere else. Unless, of course, he planted it on Wikipedia himself and then used the appearance of it on Wikipedia to bolster his argument that I got this information. Granted, Wikipedia, people have their doubts, but it's out there. I didn't make it up. He may have laundered it through Wikipedia, but I don't know. Let's see. Which is the more important of those stories? I don't know. I guess they go hand in hand. And I don't know whether either of them is something we can share on the air and get all the rest of the things that we need mentioned on the air. I don't think so. So let me just let that lie out there, and maybe we could read the Bloomberg piece a little later or tomorrow. Here is a Twitter thread that I thought was worth sharing with you from someone with whom I'm not familiar, but I liked their work in this case. Greg O'Lear, he is a blue checkmark kind of guy, author of Dirty Rubles, An Introduction to Trump Russia. And so obviously somebody who's interested in this stuff and has a little something to say about it. He put this thread together. Just sort of, I guess, a recap of what the hell's wrong with Donald Trump and why should anybody believe him about anything. Like most criminals, Donald Trump is a recidivist. I agree. A creature of habit. Definitely true. He does the same shady stuff, he uses the other word for it, over and over and over again. This is important to keep in mind when thinking about the Ukraine imbroglio. And the thread continues. 1. Donald Trump did not sexually assault just one woman. He sexually assaulted some 24 women that we know of, and a number that includes at least one of his wives. He, for reference, includes one of his old tweets here. Let's talk about how the president is a rapist and sexual predator. I'd rather not, but after his abominable Me Too comments last night, this was back in July of 2018, it's what everyone should be talking about, especially in the media, and illustrated with a screen cap of the Access Hollywood tapes. Okay, his second tweet in this thread, Donald Trump did not go bankrupt once, he declared bankruptcy 7 times. He didn't just alienate one bank with his bad credit. Every bank in the U.S. refused to lend him money. This forced him to use Deutsche Bank. Money launderers to the tsars, as he says. Number 3, Donald Trump did not exploit illegal immigrants for cheap labor just on the demolition of the Bonwit Teller building, remember way back when, with Polish workers. He did it on multiple projects. Trump doesn't just stiff one vendor, he stiffs vendors all the time. And remember, of course, he's using immigrants, both legal and otherwise, for cheap labor all over his current network of golf clubs as well. Number 4 here, Donald Trump didn't tell one lie, he lies all the time, constantly, so much so that fact checkers have a hard time keeping up. Number 5, let's apply this pattern to what we know about Ukraine. Trump did not order just one underling to help him break the law. He used a whole seditious slew. Pompeo, Giuliani, Barr, and now it seems Mike Pence. Yes, important story of the day that we haven't even gotten to yet. The headlines screaming yesterday evening, before we even moved into this morning, that Trump involved Pence in the Ukraine story rollout. Though the claim, the battle back and forth between the offices, the claim is that Pence was apparently put to use here. There's no denying that. But he had no idea what the president was hoping to chisel out of the Ukrainians. He was just a messenger in all this, right? Okay, our next break coming up here. We can probably read a tweet or two more before we take off here. Number 6 was Trump didn't just lean on Ukrainian President Zelensky once in the phone call of July 25th. The implicit quid pro quo was part of messaging that went on for months using various messengers, including, wittingly or not, the VP. Number 7 we can squeeze in here, right? Trump asked Russia for HRC, Hillary Rodham Clinton, dirt on national TV. His minions met dozens of times with Putin intermediaries. In the Oval Office post-election, he told the Russian jackals Lavrov and Kislyak that he was cool with them tampering in 2022. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Amazing stuff flying by, grabbing more and more stories. But let me continue on with the tweet storm that I was reading. I don't know, does it count as a storm? Maybe it has to be over 100 tweets if it counts as a storm. We were talking about Greg O'Lear's thread on Trump recidivism. We had left off with Trump not only asked Russia for dirt on Hillary Clinton on national TV, he also met with, or he had his minions meet dozens of times with Putin intermediaries. And in the Oval Office post-election, he told the Russian jackals, Lavrov and Kislyak, that he was cool with them tampering in 2022. That is 2020 also, I guess. I should just be clear. Not 2022, although you could certainly tamper with that if you wish. Given that Trump has taken great pains to keep secret his conversations with Vladimir Putin, are we supposed to believe that the two villains did not touch upon the subject of still more election sabotage? He asks in his 8th tweet. Number 9 here, think of all the ways Trump tried to conceal a communication with his Russian whoremaster. My goodness, whoremaster, how wrong. Can't say that on TV. Sneaking off at global summits, stashing transcripts on a secret server, using Rand Paul as a personal mailman. Do we remember this? This is got a link included with it from medium.com. This is one of his own columns on the subject. Let me just take a look at it and see. Yeah, Greg O'Lear. But reminding us, the headline here, Red Paul, haha. The senator from Kentucky is now working for Vladimir Putin. What was this going on? I guess at some point, this would have been back in January, right? Or maybe it says January 1st, so maybe it happened in December. Was there an incident with Rand Paul carrying communications back and forth between Trump and Putin at some point? Well, he makes this claim in his Medium piece here anyway. I'm just kind of scrolling through to see if there's a distinct assertion here. The dissemination of Putinist propaganda is bad enough, but let us not forget that Rand Paul has served as a Trump-Russia intermediary, on one occasion flying to Moscow to deliver a handwritten letter from the president to Putin. That doesn't ring a bell with me, but it probably got mentioned at the time. The letter emphasized the importance of further engagement in various areas, including counterterrorism, enhancing legislative dialogue, and resuming cultural exchanges, Paul said, as if Trump were capable of such nuanced statesmanship. And it says here, in the Medium piece, it continues on, as Ariel Cohen writes in The American Interest, Paul apparently botched this simple courier job. The White House was furious with the senator for going off the script and implying that he, Rand Paul, had carried a confidential message from Trump to Putin. A fuming senior U.S. administration official told me that the senator wrote the letter himself and that he insisted that U.S. embassy personnel not accompany him to his meetings with Russian officials. This follows a pattern established by Trump in Helsinki in July, where only a translator was present at his 2-hour-long meeting with Putin. Interesting. I'm going to have to look back at that one. Did I read that correctly? So Rand Paul said he was delivering a letter from Trump to Putin and said it was, I don't know what, about, what he said was that it was about totally innocuous things, the sorts of things that, they would normally discuss, but not in a private letter, and no reason to have Rand Paul courier it there himself. But then the White House, I guess, it just as a senior U.S. administration official, denies that Trump even wrote the letter and says that it was somehow forged almost, that Rand Paul wrote it and not the president. And that's really bizarre. This is another case of crazy paperwork. All right, we'll have to look into that separately. Continuing on with Greg O'Lear's tweet thread here with number 10, Russia and Ukraine were not the only countries Trump asked to, quote, do us a favor, though. He also hit up his doppelganger in the UK. And I guess while I'm at it, I'll mention that I think I just saw on Twitter that Trump has today, yes, from the South Lawn of the White House, President Trump tells reporters that China should launch an investigation into the Bidens. I now see that mentioned from just a few minutes ago, which is interesting in its own right, let's say, and would, although it would defeat or tend to weigh in against my theory that he's speaking only to English speakers about this. Maybe he's just getting more desperate. The English speakers aren't complying, but maybe China will. All right, number 11 in the tweet thread here. And if Trump had the audacity to ask Great Britain for help treasoning, why would he not ask, say, Azerbaijan or Romania or Saudi Arabia? He's like the pathetic loser at the middle school co-rec, asking every girl there to dance with him. Okay, sure, why not? Although, he thinks he's casting the net wider. I don't know whether that was his original plan. Trump's conversations with MBS, Mr. Bonesaw, the Saudi crown prince, are also reportedly on lockdown on the secret server. It will be particularly interesting to see what topics those conversations cover, if we ever get to unlock them. Number 13 here, we know Khashoggi was banned from Saudi media for being critical of Trump. We know the CIA knew that he was at risk of physical harm, which means Trump and Kushner probably knew too, but they did nothing. We know MBS was responsible, as the CIA has determined. Number 14 here, we know that Kushner and MBS have a strong bromance. We think Kushner gave his friend U.S. intelligence to help with the purge of royals. We know Saudi money helped cover Kushner's debts. We know KSA, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, was Trump's first state visit as POTUS. There is that. Are we getting away from the recidivism angle, though? Well, there's only 2 tweets left. 15, it's pretty obvious that President Alligator Moat would be cool with killing a pesky journalist if he thought he could get away with it. It's fair to ask, why did MBS order the hit on Khashoggi? It's a totally different subject here, I think. And then finally, Ukraine will get him impeached. Russia will get him removed. But Saudi Arabia could expose him once and for all as the vilest and smallest of men. 300 pounds, maybe, of pure evil in a ridiculous orange and pink skin bag. Right. Well, all very interesting and entertaining, but it did seem to get away from the recidivism theme, which is why I brought this thing forward in the first place. But okay. And it led us to something else that we'll have to investigate later on. This Rand Paul errand for Trump. Okay. Other important information that seems worthy of sharing. You should all be following along with Judd Legum's work. I want to bring this piece to light and just remind you that over the past week or two I have seen, and really even longer than that, Judd Legum doing very valuable work in trying to force Facebook, he's been most successful with Facebook, to enforce its terms of service more even-handedly, that Donald Trump ought not to be above the law. And he has, I think, successfully pushed to have taken down the accounts of various Russian and Russian-affiliated, like former Soviet state-based Facebook pages that purported to be, in fact, American political movements. And he's had some great success there. The latest entry is sort of related. Facebook, when it comes to Trump himself, they've been a lot, like Twitter, they've been hands-off with him. Facebook now says Trump can lie in his Facebook ads, which would appear to be against their terms of service. This is from his Judd's Popular Information newsletter, to which he exhorts you to subscribe. Last week, Facebook quietly changed the language of its advertising policies to make it easier for politicians to lie in ads. And this time I actually believe the claim that things were quietly changed, unlike the debunked claim from the Federalist idiot that the rules for whistleblowers were changed. On Tuesday, the Trump campaign launched a new ad on Facebook, which includes a claim that was ruled false by Facebook-approved third-party fact-checkers. On the surface, such an ad appears to violate Facebook's rules against fake content in ads, but Facebook quietly amended its policy on, quote, misinformation in advertising, allowing it to accept nearly any political ad, including this new one from the Trump campaign, just in time for their spending $1 million. Well, here it says $1.5 million on this particular ad buy. And we've been reading in the past couple of days figures like $10 million being dangled out there by Brad Parscale, insisting that they were going to just make a major offensive in pushing this, in the real world, debunked disinformation, but just put $10 million behind an effort to convince people via Facebook that it's actually true. And I think, we'll see. Maybe this is a good reason. maybe this is good reason to hurry with the impeachment proceedings to get the job done before $10 million worth of Facebook advertising convinces some additional portion of the public that the Biden story is true, for instance. All right, continuing with Judd Legum's piece here. On Tuesday, the Trump campaign launched a new ad on Facebook that its own fact checkers said was false. In the last week, the Trump campaign has exponentially increased its Facebook spending, shelling out over $1.5 million for ads. Trump's new video ad attacks rival Joe Biden. The ad, which you can watch, linked in that piece, in Judd's piece, states, quote, Joe Biden promised Ukraine $1 billion if they fired the prosecutor investigating his son's company. Facebook's advertising rules now delineate 32 categories of, quote, prohibited content. Number 13 on that list is misinformation. According to that section, Facebook prohibits ads that include claims debunked by third-party fact-checkers. Facebook partners with several third-party fact-checkers who are certified by Pointer's International Fact-Checking Network. At least two of Facebook's fact-checking partners, PolitiFact and FactCheck.org, have reviewed Trump's assertion, featured in his new ad. Both fact-checkers clearly concluded that Trump's claim about Biden was false. On September 24th, and it's linked, FactCheck.org wrote, there is no evidence that Hunter Biden was ever under investigation or that his father pressed Ukraine to fire Shokin on his behalf. On September 23rd, PolitiFact wrote, Hunter Biden did do work in Ukraine, but we found nothing to suggest Vice President Biden acted to help him. We knew this, of course. A Facebook spokesperson, however, told Popular Information that the ad does not violate Facebook's policies because political ads are ineligible for fact-checking. What is the goddamn point of fact-checking? If not that, where did fact-checking become famous? Fact-checking political claims. How could they do this? Well, they want to be billionaires, so they're doing it. Now, Facebook changes the rules. Prior to last week, Facebook had a rule against running any ads with false and misleading content. Ads, landing pages, and business practices must not contain deceptive, false, or misleading content, including deceptive claims, offers, or methods. But today, Category 13 of prohibited content has been narrowed significantly. Now, Facebook only prohibits ads that include claims debunked by third-party fact-checkers or, in certain circumstances, claims debunked by organizations with particular expertise. The old rules prohibited all ads that contained false and misleading content and made no mention of the fact-checking program. The new rules are limited to claims that are debunked by third-party fact-checkers. Moreover, Facebook says, political figures are exempt from even that narrow restriction. It is open season. In support of this contention that political ads are ineligible for fact-checking, the Facebook spokesperson cited a document called Fact-Checking on Facebook, What Publishers Should Know, which I guess can be changed at any time. That page contains a guide for the ratings options for third-party fact-checkers. That guide includes the following category: not eligible. The content contains a claim that is not verifiable, was true at the time of writing, or from a website or page with the primary purpose of expressing the opinion or agenda of a political figure. Well, we should all just be political figures from now on. Facebook claims this language excludes all direct statements from a candidate or a campaign from fact-checking, including ads. Facebook included a link to this document in its advertising policies when it revised them last week. Now, no matter how many lies are contained in an ad from Trump or any other political figure, Facebook will allow it to run. That's just give me the money. Come on. I mean, there's no justification for that whatsoever. Why even bother setting up with the fact checkers? Why is PolitiFact.org your fact checker if you're not going to check political facts? Last week, Nick Clegg, Facebook's VP of Global Affairs and Communication, gave a speech at the Atlantic Festival about the company's efforts to fight interference and misinformation in advance of the 2020 election. At times, Clegg appears to indicate that political ads would be subject to fact-checking. because that's what they needed to do at the Atlantic Festival. They needed to say that. That's why I want to be really clear today. We do not submit speech by politicians to our independent fact checkers, and we generally allow it on the platform even when it would otherwise breach our normal content rules. Of course, there are exceptions. Broadly speaking, they are twofold, where speech endangers people and where we take money, which is why we have more stringent rules on advertising than we do for ordinary speech and rhetoric. But in a preamble to the speech posted on Facebook, Clegg writes that, quote, "We will not send organic content or ads from politicians to our third-party fact-checking partners for review." Clegg did not explain, however, that excluding political ads from review by third-party fact-checkers means that no political ad will be rejected for false content. The new rules conveniently solve the Trump campaign's problem with following the old rules. In the last several months, Popular Information has identified false and misleading ads by the Trump campaign that might not be prohibited under the new definition because they weren't evaluated by one of Facebook's fact-checking partners. The ads include a false ad targeting seniors that claimed Trump was still considering closing the southern border, quote, next week, when he had already publicly announced that he would not close the border for at least a year. And an ad scamming its supporters by claiming there was a midnight deadline to enter a contest to win the 1 millionth red MAGA hat signed by President Trump. The ad was run every day for weeks. And an ad that falsely claimed Democrats are trying to repeal the Second Amendment. Now, as Facebook allows the Trump campaign to run false ads, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg privately said that it would, quote, suck if Elizabeth Warren, one of the Democratic frontrunners, was elected president. If that happened, Zuckerberg promised to, quote, go to the mat and fight her. He made the comments in a meeting with Facebook employees, which was leaked to The Verge. And here's the leak. That doesn't mean that even if there's anger and that you have someone like Elizabeth Warren who thinks that the right answer is to break up the companies, I mean, if she gets elected president, then I would bet that we will have a legal challenge, and I would bet that we will win the legal challenge. And does that still suck for us? Yeah, I mean, I don't want to have a major lawsuit against our own government. I mean, that's not the position that you want to be in when you're, it's like we care about our country, and we want to work with our government and do good things. But look, at the end of the day, if someone's going to try to threaten something that existential, you go to the mat and you fight. You could just take the billions you've made and quit now. What if they closed Facebook tomorrow? Who cares? These comments directly undercut claims by Trump and his allies that Facebook has a bias against conservatives. In these candid comments, Zuckerberg is much more concerned with the prospect of Warren becoming president and the impact on Facebook's bottom line than Trump being reelected. What would really suck is if we don't fix a corrupt system that lets giant companies like Facebook engage in illegal, anti-competitive practices, stomp on consumer privacy rights, and repeatedly fumble their responsibility to protect our democracy. Warren responded, and I think she's right. But that's pretty outrageous. I just thought I would share that with you because it's so bizarre. I mean, how in the world could you have missed the fact that they set up PolitiFact as a third-party fact-checker? What is PolitiFact going to do now that they are being asked not to check any political facts, at least none that are in ads, and I guess really nothing uttered by a political figure? It's now a no-show job. That's it. Bring them up on racketeering charges. That's how you'll end up getting Facebook back in court. They're racketeers setting up no-show job contracts for fact-checkers. Really, there's literally no role for them anymore. All right, getting towards the end of the line here. Let's see. I think I really need to dive into Pocket and see if I can find the backup for these claims of forged information. Really, honestly, I'm going to have to get it. Let me grab Josh Rogan's tweet here, which began which was the basis of my claims about what Rudy was doing with the information turned over by the state inspector general yesterday. Josh Rogan, of course, I say of course as though I know offhand. I have to go and look. A Washington Post political analyst, also occasionally analyst on CNN. He tweeted yesterday at 8:28 p.m., so late evening. By the way, Rudy is admitting to manufacturing White House logos and sticking them on non-White House documents and pushing the real government to act on them. I haven't seen published reports of this in a newspaper just yet, but I haven't had a chance to sift through and find out, did Josh follow up with this. He includes his own tweet in this one, a prior tweet, which just a minute before reads, Rudy admits to CNN he passed the packet of Ukraine conspiracy theories and attacks on a U.S. ambassador to Pompeo. They, the State Department, told me they would investigate it. The chief claim in this packet of misinformation was apparently all about the attacks, which we told you about in yesterday's show, on the then U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Yovanovitch, that I was trying to recall her name, and I think I said Yanukovych, who was the actual old president of Ukraine who was forced into exile. But lots of Y beginnings and Vitch endings out there. But I guess here this packet of information was all apparently aimed at pushing out Yovanovitch, who I guess, according to our reading yesterday and even the day before, was pretty clued into who Parnas and Fruman really were and what their backgrounds really were, and was, prior to being forced out, pretty dedicated to making sure that they didn't influence American policy in Ukraine, and that bothered them. That made her an enemy that needed to be pushed out of the way. So let's see. There's some more conversation that goes on in this thread that Josh begins. Tim Carr from Free Press and Free Press Action, they are activists in the freedom of the press front, replies to Josh saying, still trying to track down your source for this manufacturing logos scoop. It has serious implications. It does, doesn't it? I just can't find the corroborating evidence. Can you point me in that direction? Thanks in advance. Well, that's a major claim, right? And so, rightfully, a major question about that. I'm still waiting for the source, too. Walter Schaub, who we all know is the previous director of the Office of Government Ethics, who's been very prominent during the Trump administration, a prominent Trump critic, says, Josh, are you inferring that from his statement, Giuliani's statement, that he's responsible for the packet, or is he literally saying he sat down and drew White House in the upper left? Wow. Josh answers, he's admitted to passing the packet to Pompeo. I don't know who exactly worked on the Photoshop, but the president's lawyer gave it to the Secretary of State, and this was not an official White House document. Now, Schaub responds, thanks. I asked because it doesn't look photoshopped to me. It looks hand-drawn, which is insane. It'll be interesting to see if he specifically says he created the fake logo. Compare the Pompeo package to an actual White House envelope. And I don't know who's holding this thing up here, but the envelope that had this information that they were talking about at the briefing yesterday is, the big manila envelope. And up in the corner, it does look like it is calligraphied, the White House. Now, compared to an actual White House envelope, you usually do see up in the top, there's a specific and recognizable type font that they use for this thing. It says the White House, Washington, D.C., 20502. Did you know that was the zip code? And everybody knows, that's the White House. It's an official document. This one, they just mocked up, drawing the White House, not drawing a picture of the White House, but writing the words "the White House" in block print up at the top, but they forgot the Washington, D.C. 20502 in there. And then the address, such as it is on the envelope, in the address space of the envelope, it says Secretary Pompeo, and then it says, "Attention, Ruth," who I guess is his personal assistant. But this is done in like super flowery calligraphy, which is amazing because, I mean, I guess in their minds, whoever put the package together was like, well, super fancy calligraphy means official. They'll know for sure that this is official, good information that's supposed to go to the secretary, who's an important guy. And he's so important, we used fancy calligraphy to write it. I really don't know what the thought process there is besides that, which is pretty incredible all by itself. Back to the thread here. I guess Josh Marshall at this point chimes in. Given how closely involved the president has been in this, it seems quite premature to assume those signages and calligraphy are bogus. I don't, because they're obviously bogus, and I cannot figure out for the life of me what Josh's hesitancy is here. But I just wanted to kind of put that on the record here, where this came from. This is rather bizarre, and I guess I'll be spending some time looking tomorrow into, where did this come from, and what is the provenance of this, and did Josh follow up on this and write anything about the what amounts to a forgery? I can't really, describe it in any other terms. Now, there's also out there the story of the what's the other fake document provenance story that's out here. I've lost track of which one it was. Why is it that this is it. Yes, the Washington Post's piece from Carol Leonig and Craig Timberg and Drew Harrell, which I don't have time to share with you, but is titled Odd Markings, comma, ellipses, fuel doubts about the rough transcript of Trump's Ukraine call. I mean, I think, like I said, that was something that was obvious to everyone who read through it and decided that it only took 10 minutes to read the thing. But now it's official, and it's in the Washington Post, and now we're all able to point to this and say, yeah, that transcript is pretty hinky too. That's not as much an outright forgery of simply writing the White House in the corner, and not as childish as using fancy calligraphy to try to claim that this is an official document, even though it looks nothing like the official documents. We're going to have to dig some more, and we'll have to do it tomorrow, because now it's time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And you can be sure that there's a ton of material we missed, even on the main story today. But thankfully, Justice is always here to back us up.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Let's skip down to the next paragraph here, although there's a good setup for the Ukraine stuff to be sure. But the South Carolina GOP is slammed with a lawsuit for canceling its primary to protect Trump. Leaked audio from a recent ALEC seminar on gerrymandering exposed an ex-GOP lawmaker bragging about tricking black Democrats with gerrymandering schemes. Wow.